everyone's happy?
Yes.
Everyone had a good week?
Yes.
Everyone's preparing for the incoming recession and depression and all of that fun stuff?
Yes. Absolutely.
Can't relate when Friday.
I was talking to, I don't remember who I was talking to the other day, but it was an interesting situation I was describing because I was like, I feel like if we didn't make a ton of money in the last 6 to 9 months, the rude awakening that's going to happen inside of the next 6 to 9 months is that it's going to take twice as much work to get the same result. So, and everybody I was speaking to kind of affirmed that notion. But today we're talking about once you've got the listing, you've got it sold, or you managed the buyer, and you brought the person to see a bunch of properties, they finalized on a deal, and now it's time for the building inspection. So we're going to go over a ton of stuff. We're going to go over kind of what things to look out for, what are kind of the best practices during the building inspection, what to say, what not to say, things to look out for, things that are legitimate concerns, and then things that are fluffy cat bullshit things that building inspectors may bring up just to kind of fill the air, as my dad would say. So first of all, if you work with a good building inspection company, whether it's a person, a full company, whatever, typically you're not going to have very many problems. And when I say problems, I don't mean necessarily with the house, I mean with the transaction. There's always going to be problems with the house. And the most important thing to remember is over-communicating. So what I mean by that is when you're representing a buyer, let's say, the amount of times you tell them, hey, by the way, it's normal to expect 5 to 7%, 2 to 7%, whatever it is, but usually the magic number is around 5%. It's normal to expect about 5% of the value of the property is going to need to be fixed up in the property. We might find that in the inspection. That's totally normal. The other thing to over-communicate about is kind of what I like to call the standard things that every house in the entire West Island, the entire Laval area, the entire Montreal West area, every single house has the following 3 problems. What are they? Benji, give me the first one. Every single house in the entire greater Montreal area has these 3 problems with them. What are they? Give me the first one.
Come on.
Cracks.
Cracks in the foundation. Yep, absolutely.
I feel like every company.
Absolutely, cracks in the foundation. What's next?
Alex, give the second one.
The land grading.
The land grading. Every single house has crappy land grading.
We're in inspection now.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, we're talking about inspection.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I thought we were just walking the line for a house.
no. We're preparing them for the inspection so that they're not surprised when the inspector inevitably finds a crack or 2 in the foundation. Now, when somebody hears crack in the foundation, usually the alarm bells start sounding in their head. They're like, oh my God, I got to replace the whole foundation. It's going to cost 80 large. In the reality, what do the crack cost to fix, guys? $700,000, $1,200 if maybe you go crazy and there's a plate and they dig it from the outside. How much is it if they have to inject it from the inside? $500, $400 maybe. Cheap. Yeah. When do you have to worry about a crack in the foundation?
It's moving.
Well, there's no way to actually look at it to see it moving, but
You see water?
well, when you see water, sure, absolutely. But even a crack that is not really a big deal is going to leak water if there's a water table. Deflection is the word you're looking for. So what Benji's talking about is not when a crack is just flat like this and there's a little bit of a separation. It's totally normal.
Yeah.
What Benji's describing is, I'm doing it for camera now. Deflection is like this, when the crack goes like that. Obviously, I'm exaggerating heavily, but because I've never seen something that bad. But that's deflection, and obviously that's a huge worry. If you see that happening, that's massive, and that could triple, quadruple, or even 5x the cost of the repair of the crack. Because then what they may have to do is shave down, rebar, membrane, bunch of things, and that's worth being concerned about. But we need to see at least 1.5 inches of deflection before we start panicking whatsoever. Okay, so cracks in the foundation, that's number 1. What else is every single house has this problem? What is it? Cracks in the foundation number 2 is?
Poor ventilation.
Yes, thank you, absolutely. Poor ventilation or not enough insulation, right? So there's always something in the attic, and it's 99 times out of 100, it's poor ventilation or it's lack of insulation in the attic. So a lot of times, and the reason why this is, by the way, is because a lot of the homes that we sell in the West Island, the Montreal West area, Lachine, not so much condos and newer construction, but the older properties, they just put, like half the time, the original, what do you call it, insulation is crumpled up newspaper, for God's sake. Literally, that was insulation. So the solution is not to remove the insulation, it's actually just to add another layer. And again, the cost of which a lot of times the clients exaggerate in their minds, but in all reality, adding a layer of insulation, you can literally just go to Reno Depot and get that pink insulation and do it yourself. It's not that difficult. Chuck that all over the roof, all over the attic, as long as you're not covering the soffits, you're good to go. You're talking like maximum $3,000. Maximum $3,000, and that's if you rent the thing that blows the stuff and you're going crazy. If you're just slapping the sheets of the pink stuff on it, we're talking like under $1,000 to do the entire attic for most houses.
Accommodating ventilation too, the balcony's venting into the attic.
Yes, and that, yeah, absolutely super common. Is how many contractors do you guys know that love to finish the job? Not really, right? Most contractors love to do the big stuff, and then when it comes down to the finishing, they're a little less excited. So we see that a lot when we're in the building inspection, where they have to vent out the air in the bathroom. So you're taking a hot shower, it's not good for all that hot air to sit in the bathroom. That's why typically you'll see cracking and peeling on the ceiling of the bathroom. That's because it's not being ventilated properly. So you check the fan's venting, but then when the inspector goes into the attic, it's just going in the attic. Now what's the problem with that? Mold. You got it, absolutely. You're taking wet, soggy air, throwing it up into the attic. There's poor attic ventilation, so it's not really going anywhere. That needs to be vented straight out of the house, either through a gable vent or roof vents, or if it's done properly, you can do it out of the soffits. It's not really recommended, but that's okay. But yeah, that's a great note as well. So we've got land grade, we've got cracks in the foundation, and we've got the poor ventilation and lack of insulation in the attic. Those are the main things. Those pretty much every single house will have. Okay? So preparing your clients, over communicating with your clients, and making sure that they're in touch with the inspector beforehand. You know, maybe even call the inspector and say, hey, why don't you give them a little rundown? I know you're doing an inspection on a property that was built in 1973. You should probably give them a rundown in terms of what to expect based on the age of that house. Is that okay with you, Mr. and Mrs. Inspector? Yeah, sure, absolutely. So they call and then they prep them. Now everybody's on the same page, right? So, fast forward a little bit. The actual inspection. For those of you who know me pretty well, this is my least favorite part of the entire business of real estate. I hate building inspections so much. And I blame the fact that I flipped so many properties that, especially when it was more of a buyer's market, the inspection was nerve-wracking. Because back then, one little thing and the buyers are out of there, right? So, and of course I'm the one selling the property, so I didn't have a chance to over-communicate with the buyers. So I'm just there like, for the love of God, let this end, you know? But you do learn some little tricks to keep everybody at ease. Make sure that the communication tactics that you're using at the inspection are non-inflammatory, are, you know, a little more easygoing, a little more uplifting, positive energy, all that fun stuff, right? So I'm going to share with you a couple of little tips that I've learned over the years. So number one, don't arrive empty-handed. Come to every single inspection, you should have Timbits and coffee. It'll cost you $30, but I promise you it'll elevate the entire energy of the space by at least one entire number, like 1 to 10 type thing. If you go in and it's a 4, you bring Timbits and coffee, it's up to a 5. You come in and it's a 7, it's bumping up to an 8 every single time. I've learned that time and time again. Never show up empty-handed. The next thing is give them space. Nobody wants, especially if you're representing the seller, nobody wants somebody following the goddamn inspector around, you know, criticizing every little thing that he says throughout the entire inspection. That's amateur. That's super amateur moves right there. So instead, what you do is you take a back seat. You take a back seat, you give them space. Now, that doesn't mean you don't check in. You absolutely check in. But you try and time your check-ins based on where they're at. Example, they finish the basement. You feel, you hear, guys, we all know, right? We know the kind of conversations people have, the tone of voice that they use when they're finishing something up and when they're wrapping something up, right? So in the basement, they're wrapping up the basement. You hear that, you sense that, you head downstairs. What is the one sentence to ask them? Yes, exactly. Any surprises? Hey there, guy from Sherlock Inspections. How's the basement? Great. Any surprises? No? Not really. So even if he saw some stuff and said some stuff, and the buyers are thinking, oh my God, it's a big deal, it's a big deal. You've asked him, any surprises, anything out of the ordinary? He says, no, everything's fine. And then the buyer's like, oh, okay, everything's normal, great. Absolutely. So you just do that based on segments of the house. You know, when they finish up the outside and they're ready to come inside, you're like, how's the outside, guys? Everything good? Any surprises, Mr. or Mrs. Inspector? No? Great, fantastic. And you just keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. So, never arrive empty-handed. Are there any surprises? Those are the main things to remember. What's up, Ceviche? How are you, buddy? So the other thing is, I don't believe in this idea that, you know, if we're representing the buyer, that we're somehow against the person representing the seller. I've never bought into that. I've never bought into that in my entire life. I've always known that we're working in a collaborative way to make sure that the deal gets done. Because if you've heard me talk before, you've heard me say that the people, the clients that we have, do not remember whether we've saved them a certain amount of money or got them a little bit more than their asking price. They remember that we got the job done. That's what they remember. But the opposite side of that coin is the same. They won't remember that you went down with the ship trying to save them $5,000. They're going to remember that you couldn't get the job done, that you did not sell their house, that you failed. They're not going to remember that you were really, really hard with the negotiations and the buyer walked, and you have their best interest in mind, right? Bullshit. They don't give a shit about that. The only thing that they care about is whether you got the job done or you did not get the job done. Because at the end of the day, in 15, 20 years, when they're in their new house, when they're in their new living situation or whatever, that $5,000, it doesn't matter. It's a drop in the bucket for most people. And I'm using $5,000 facetiously. It could be 1,000, it could be 20,000, whatever. All that matters is it's the accomplishment of the deal that matters more than anything. So, like I said, it's a collaborative effort. So let me give you an example. And this has been taught to me by my dad since I started in the business. Everything should be done in a way that just makes logical sense. So I've had agents come to me when I've listed a property and they say, well, the building inspectors found that the roof is it's come due. And the seller's declaration said that it was about 10 years old, but it looks to be closer to 15, 16 years old, so it's going to need to be done. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, so it's going to be about $10,000, $12,000 to replace the roof, so we're just going to send you an amendment to take off that amount of money. And I'm like, no. And again, I'm not like being hard for the sake of being hard to like save my clients the money. That just makes no bloody sense. Why doesn't that make any sense?
Because they didn't pay for a brand new roof.
Exactly, they didn't bargain for a brand new roof. Why am I upgrading the property? Why is my client upgrading the property for the potential buyer? It's the same thing when they encounter a furnace and they know the furnace is 20 years old, right? And then the inspector does a couple tests. They're like, wow, this thing is ready to go. It's donezo. And they're like, cool, it's $15,000 for a new furnace with installation. Your client's gonna pay that. Hell no. Because your client didn't bargain for a brand new furnace. If they did, it would be different. If, let's say, on the seller's declaration, I said the roof is done last year, it's ready to go, and they isolate that these are defective shingles or something like that, then yeah, they bargained for a new roof. And that's our responsibility to make sure that we're holding up our end of the bargain during the negotiation process. But this is what I'm talking about when everything just has to kind of make logical sense more than anything. So keep that in mind when you're going through the building inspection process. And the other thing too is, if you're on the sell side, if you're selling the property, you're the listing agent, don't do anything verbally. And at the same side, if you're in the buy side, don't do anything written. You understand what I'm saying? Because on the sell side, you don't want to have anything indicated that isn't in writing, because you can use that to your advantage. If you've got something in second position, it takes a lot of balls on the buy side to be able to put pen to paper and say, hey, I'm willing to walk from this property if you do not reduce it by X. Because that's essentially what they're doing, right? With an amendment, they're reopening the offer. Maybe do a counter proposal, amendment, whatever, but they're opening themselves up. To do that is, I can't even imagine in a seller's market like we're experiencing, what kind of nerves that takes. So on the sell side, never anything verbal. On the buy side, always verbal. Because you want to make sure that you get the okay from Delano that, hey man, if I send you this $5,000 amendment, are we good? And Delano's smart, he's going to say, I don't know, send it, we'll see. But again, I always advocate for collaboration, working well with the other person. Again, just trying to make a deal happen. Because that's, like I said, that's how people are going to remember you by. That's how you're going to get referrals. In my experience, the referrals that I've received and the referrals that my father has received have never been about the tangible results, the kind of nitty-gritty results of the transaction. It's always just been, this is Jim, this is Logan. They sold our house. It's crazy. I've told this story, and I won't use names because I don't know them, so that's easy. But my dad concluded this transaction, and we've all had these from time to time again, like once every few years or whatever, but it was a nasty transaction. Like, it did not go well at all, at all. They felt like, they had to take an offer that was too low, and, it was a lot of just miscommunication, and it was bad. It was a really, really bad transaction. And to the point where during the final negotiations, they signed the deal. They said, fine, we accept, or I don't remember if it was a reduction after inspection or something, but anyway, they were unhappy about signing it, but they knew that they had to because they were extremely motivated, and they had to get out. So they signed it, and they ended up kicking my dad out of the house. And I said, okay, cool, deal's done, get the fuck out of my house, kind of thing. My dad was like, okay, no problem. So, he knew that they were going through some emotional states. So he was just like, it's okay, it's good, it's done, it's whatever. And I remember, and I was just a kid, I wasn't licensed at the time, I think it was like 15 or 14 or something. And he comes home, and he was like, my dad's an emotional cat, he's very affected by these types of things, So it kind of messed him up that, he felt like they didn't appreciate what he had done and all the rest of it. And then sure enough, 5 years later, it had to have been when I was 14 or 15, because 5 years later I was 19 or 20 and I was licensed. And this guy, the same people that threw him out of their house, called them up, and because he sold them a house too, I think, and they called him up and said, hey, Jimbo! I swear to God, I can't remember. Hey, Jimbo! And my dad's like, yeah? Hey, I don't remember the guy's name, let's call him Gary. Hey, it's Gary, how are you doing? And my dad's like, I wasn't expecting to hear from this guy, but what? This is crazy. He's like, hey, listen, we bought a house in this province or whatever, we gotta sell this one. We thought we had to call you. My dad's like, what? Anyway, mind blown. And it was that kind of reinforced when I started hearing that people don't necessarily remember the nitty-gritty details about, how you got the job done and all the stuff that we remember, right? It's just, he remembered that my dad got the job done. And so much so that he called to become a repeat client for probably the third time. I think that was the second one anyways. But yeah, absolutely incredible. So just keep that in mind when you're going through these negotiations so you don't stress so much about it. I find people, especially in their younger years as a realtor, they put a lot of pressure on themselves during the building inspection process. And they freak out very easily, and the stress kind of gets to them. And that's okay, it's all good, it's the final step, right? The other thing that I always say is the reason I love real estate so much is because the amount of wins and euphoric moments you have within a transaction. So it starts with lead generation. You get an appointment. Absolute euphoria when you book an appointment, yes or yes?
Yes.
Hell yeah. So you book an appointment, euphoria. You go to the appointment, you sign it. You sign that listing. Euphoric or not? Yeah. Hell yeah, right? So then the listing gets up. You get an offer that's, very acceptable, super great. They accept it. Euphoria, right? Okay. Then building inspection goes. They send the notice of fulfillment of conditions. It's done. You got financing, building inspection. Are you happy? Yeah. Absolutely. Bang, bang. Goes to notary. You get to go there and be the hero with a nice closing gift or whatever it is that you do. That's cool too, right? Absolutely. And then last but not least, that check gets deposited in your bank account. Is that a euphoric moment? Yes or yes? Hell yeah. So you pack like 7 or 8 really like uplifting moments in a transaction. So I think it's just really important that we focus on those and less about kind of the occasional like, ooh, I'm stressed about certain things or whatever. Now, so back to the actual building inspection of it. It's really important that we understand what things typically cost, and it's really important that we understand what typically building inspectors are going to point out. So let's riff. Let's open this thing up. What are we noticing that people are pointing out nowadays, and what are things that we find that people are maybe missing? Go.
That's window inspections.
Mm-hmm.
Window quality.
Are they missing that you find, or they're getting that?
Pointing it out.
Yeah, yeah. Especially the older windows, really, really important. Yeah, super important. So the cost of this has changed dramatically, but you used to be able to re-inject these windows. And it used to be really, really affordable to re-inject windows because you know how it's glass, argon gas glass. So you used to be able to kind of rip the seal, re-inject, reseal it. It's almost not even worth it now. It's better to just get a new window.
It's more expensive now.
It's super expensive now. There's only a couple of companies that do it. La Chimie does it. But if the window is more than like 10, 12 years old, just get a new window. Because the efficiency's gone up tremendously in the last little while as well. So yeah, when you see that kind of gross moisture in between the panes, you know, those are your two options. If it's a really new window and you think it's just a fluke, sure you can have it injected, but we're talking about like, it used to be $50 a pane to get it injected. Now it's closer to like $300.
$300
per pane.
for argon gas?
Yeah. Well, it's not that. It's the labor of, they have to actually like take the actual window pane out of the PVC and then do all of the work, then put it back, then reattach the PVC. So it's a massive job.
I mean, if no one would work it, I guess.
If it's a new window, exactly.
What would you do this time of year though? Just because the windows are like on back order for 6 months to like.
Yeah.
So
you take the whole.
Going into the fall, would you tell them to do it, or like going from fall going into winter? Do they wait till the spring to do it? Tell them to do it now, order it.
Like, are you talking about a discussion with the seller?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say don't do it. Don't do it. Especially like it's tough, right? We want to make sure that we're recommending things that are going to get more than 4 quarters for their dollar. Windows are not something you're going to get more than 4 quarters for your dollar for. Kitchen, bathrooms, that's where you get your money. You do not get your money from roof and windows and furnace and all that kind of stuff. Those are great like things for an investor like myself. I'm looking at the roof and the windows and the furnace. I'm thinking, hell yeah, good bones, let's go. You know. But the average homeowner is going to be like, what's the kitchen look like? What are the bathrooms like?
Superficial stuff.
Yeah, it's all superficial stuff. So if I'm speaking to a seller, I'm telling them do not touch those windows. Because worst case scenario, we get a quote, right? You know you have to change it anyways. We get a quote, and maybe we don't even have to cover the entire amount.
No.
Right?
Actually, in the market that we work.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's going to be a little touch and go moving forward. If they want to sell next spring, let's say, I don't know the crystal ball, I have no idea what that's going to be like. So the other thing I find that most building inspectors bring up is GFCI plugs. Yes?
Always.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that makes me angry. How much is a GFCI plug?
$8, $7,
$7, $8, depending on the polarities, yeah, absolutely. But the average one is about $25.
Oh shit.
Yeah, $25 for your GFCI plug.
And installation.
Yeah, so,
Dude.
bro,
It's too screwed.
like,
Do it yourself.
yeah, it's you find the breaker, you find it's not difficult, man. It's really not difficult. It's especially not difficult when there's already a plug there, because you can literally pull out the plug with the breaker's up, the breaker is off.
Always.
Right? Breaker's off. Sometimes I like to do it with the breaker on because I'm like, yeah, I'm an electrician, you know. But you pull it out and you say, okay, that's the gold side, that's the silver side, and you just match it up with the new one. It's super duper easy. Now, most people won't do it on their own, and that's fine. You know, we can't expect them to know how to do that or want to do that or whatever. But this is not worth talking about at the building inspection.
No.
And when you catch a building inspector or when you catch buyers or even your sellers talking about little things like that, all you have to do is you don't come in, you know, and be all upset about it. You simply say, well, that's great. I actually just replaced a couple of these at a client's house not too long ago. Each one of these plugs are $25, guys. So let's wait for something serious, shall we? Slink back. You know that the Homer into the bushes meme? It's like we slink back in, you know?
Yeah, the Honda didn't have to just guide any mention.
Yeah, so just so you guys know, do you guys know the rule for GFCI? If you can touch water and touch the plug, it has to be GFCI. That's the rule. Well, yeah, it should probably use like guys like you and me to like wingspan it, you know?
1.5 meters.
Yeah, exactly. But most inspectors are gonna be like, okay, no, that's far enough away, you're good.
We're from school.
Oh yeah, there you go, 1.5 meters.
At one of the
They had an electrician come in.
Yep.
And the electrician said that the only one that needs to be changed is next to the sink.
Yeah, because the other ones were probably far enough away.
Okay, but it's 1.5 meters.
Yeah.
Imagine Sam just doing his little reach.
Who?
Sam.
Oh my god, yeah, that'd be so funny. Yeah, that'd be awesome. So yeah, GFCI, obviously super huge. What else are we noticing that building inspectors are bringing up right now that we need to be armed and ready for?
The soffit conversation, I found a lot of homes that are
Oh, yeah.
uninsulated, nobody talks about that.
Absolutely, yeah. The soffits are kind of a different conversation because there's a lot of intricacies. First of all, does everyone know what a soffit is?
Yeah,
No, but mine are blocked in my house, so I'd like to know.
Yeah, okay, so there's two different definitions for blocked. So soffits are typically the roof doesn't just stop where the wall of the house is. It's not like that. The roof typically overhangs by, let's say this, right? This amount and all those little holes, that's soffits. Back in the 60s, you didn't have those metal sheets with the holes in them. What did you have? Wood. You'd have wood, and I'm not kidding, the occasional looks like a floor register every like 6 to 10 feet. And that's what they thought was venting the attic. It was doing a shit job, obviously. So then, you know, in the 70s and stuff like that, people were ripping out all the wood when they redid their roofs, ripped out all the softening wood and put the metal stuff. Because the idea behind roof ventilation is you've got maxi vents at the top, right? Depending on the size of your roof, you might have 2, you might have 4, who knows? So maxi vents are just pulling the air out from the attic. And what's happening with the soffits is air is coming in from the soffits. So air is coming in, getting circulated, and out the top. And you just constantly have that movement. Constantly have that movement. So ideally, when you go into an attic, it should be the same temperature as the outside. It shouldn't be hotter, and it shouldn't be significantly colder than the outside. It should be about the same temperature as the outside. That's usually a healthy insulation, because imagine you don't want all of your AC, well, AC typically falls, right? But let's say during the wintertime, you don't want your heat coming up through the attic. That's why you have that insulation there, right? Then you have all the air moving around. So softening, when somebody says that they're blocked, there's two different things that could have happened there. One of them I experienced in one of my flips. I thought the softening was done. I was wrong. What did they do? They had the wood, right? And rather than remove the wood, they just covered it with the metal crap with the holes. So it was like literally just for the look. It was so frustrating. I was going to murder somebody. Not actually. Not actually, I swear to God. That's not me. But yeah, no, it was very, very frustrating. So we had to rip it all down, cut the wood wide open and whatever. Now, that's kind of not super common. That's probably like a under 5% situation. What Jason's probably referring to is that the insulation is covering it. So what happens is when people re-insulate their attic, like I was talking about before, you can have the sheets of the insulation, like the Pink Panther insulation that you get from Rent a Depot or Home Depot or whatever. Or you can rent a machine that you attach like a bunch of kind of like ammunition to. It's got a big hose like this, and you press go. You have somebody down, like, press go. Yeah, it just throws all these little things of insulation, and they kind of naturally settle, and it's wonderful, wonderful insulation. It's a little bit better than the Pink Panther stuff, but whatever. You know what I mean? It's not rocket science. So the problem is when you have an amateur doing that, he probably doesn't know. He never attended one of Montreal's elite's trainings, so he doesn't know any better. So he's there gunning the whole thing, thinking he's doing an awesome job. He's like, keep it coming, Johnny, and he's fucking just going at it, you know what I mean? And he's covering all the soffits. He doesn't realize that that's terrible. Because what they should have done is had some kind of wall or some kind of piece of plastic set up where he could just go ham on it and it wouldn't affect the soffits. But most of the time they don't do that. So that's super common. That's like, most houses have that. The good news is the solution is really, really easy. You go up there with a rake. Literally. Go up there with one of those plastic garden rakes, rake it all off. It's that easy. I've done it many times. Super annoying, incredibly itchy, but not difficult. Yeah. So, a little bit about that. That's fun. What else?
Wait, but are the soffits supposed to be free and clear from any insulation whatsoever, or just lightly put on top?
Free and clear.
Free and clear?
Yep, 100% free and clear. Any obstruction could stop the flow of air, right? So,
Which is why it's humid up there.
yeah, so, right? So if you've got all this hot condensed air, right, and it's meeting, not now, but in the wintertime, when heat, extreme freaking heat, meets extreme cold, what happens?
Yeah, it's on fire.
Condensation, thank you so much, right? Condensation creates
Moisture.
moisture, water, right, and which is a breeding ground for mold. So it's not super uncommon to see mold inside of an attic. It's actually really common, right? It's another thing not to freak out about. All you have to do is isolate, okay, when did this happen? Why did it happen? And, you know, let's throw some bleach on this bad boy. Because that's essentially what these companies do. They come in with a foam situation that is basically just foam bleach. And they attack it, they foam the living crap out of it, they wait a couple days, they come back, they make sure it's all gone, they might hit it one more time, and that's it. It's not, again, not rocket science. If it was me, if it was my house and I was buying it and I saw mold in the attic, I would probably handle it myself. I've had to hire these companies a couple of times because we didn't see it when we bought it, and then the building inspector found it, and now I have to hire like a proper guy to come in with an RBQ number and the whole thing. Just to give you guys a frame of reference, it's usually under $4,000 to do an entire attic, to demold an entire attic. So obviously kind of expensive, but not the end of the world, the house is falling down type of an expense, right? So, yeah. What else? So I just encountered this one, which is really, really fun. So something for you guys to keep an eye out, especially for older properties, but also, in addition to that, significantly more common in triplexes, duplexes, things of that nature. So when things were built a long time ago, oftentimes in the center, in Point Claire, usually it's metal, the main beam, because they were using the railway tracks, which is genius. McGill's a genius. But the older properties, let's say in some areas of Lachine, and that's where I was when I saw this, it's literally like a tree. It's like the equivalent of like a telephone pole. You know those round pieces of wood, they're like that big? That thing's holding up the whole house. So, which is fine, right? But the issue is it's wood. It warps, it moves, it sinks, it dives, it does all these types of things, right? So we were walking around the main level and all of a sudden I'm like, looking around like something's wrong here. So I go and I grab a water bottle and I put it down and it was all the way into the living room. I'm like, oh shit. So then we go down to the basement, I see that the beam is raw wood like that. And I see that a lot of the metal posts holding it up, right? One of them was extremely rusted at the bottom. So I'm sure that like gave a little bit or whatever. And one of them was like shimmed with the worst shims I've ever seen in my entire life. I was like, why didn't they just crank it more or just replace the damn thing or whatever? So this is something where you'd have to get a company or yourself to jack it up and put a new thing like that because the entire house was like a little bit lopsided. Not by much, but like you'd be surprised. It's off by 3 or 4 degrees. That water ball is flying down that hallway, like flying with 3 or 4 degrees. But it's not a huge deal when you're thinking about jacking it up and replacing it with a proper, what do you call it? Help me. Post, beam, whatever. Yep. So yeah, fun stuff. But it's just like kind of the attitude I find a lot of times that buyers have is, you know, they're so panicked and they've got good reason to be, right? It's really important to put ourselves in their shoes. This might be their first time ever buying a house, so let's assume that that's the case for the purposes of this conversation. This is the first time they're buying a house, right? They're buying something for $500,000 average, right? In Montreal.
They're buying something for $500,000. They've never bought anything even remotely close to that amount in terms of expensiveness, right? And they want to live in here for probably as close to forever as they can get. So if they see anything wrong, of course their mind's going to wander. Of course it's going to be an inflammatory type of thought process, right? So it's silly for us to get judgy about that, but it's also dangerous for us not to put things into perspective for them, because then we're not doing our job. We're not guiding them appropriately. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what else? What else do you find people are seeing that we need to discuss?
Electrical maybe, adapters and all that stuff.
Yeah. So 76, I think. If anything's built after, I think it's 74, 76. Forgive me, I don't remember exactly. But essentially, in the 70s, anything built in the 70s, keep an eye out for it. You don't really want aluminum wiring. Does anyone know why you don't want aluminum wiring? Don't say it will catch fire. That's a crappy answer. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. When aluminum heats up, when electrical current goes through aluminum, it expands and contracts at a different rate than copper, and it expands and contracts harder than copper. So what happens is that over time, the connections for an aluminum wire become loose. Loose connections cause sparks, fire, etc. That's why it's dangerous. Okay? Now they do make adapters to go into the box, because it's not super dangerous on like an outlet level. Because when a spark happens, typically the breaker will go off, and it's pretty safe. It's dangerous at the panel. So that's why they sell an adapter to go from aluminum to copper. So a lot of times, people look at it and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to rewire the whole house, and I tell them you can. That's totally your prerogative if you want to do that, but it is by no means necessary. It's by no means necessary to rewire the whole house. If you want to because you want to, that's because you want to. It's not because it has to be done, it's not because it's super dangerous or anything like that. So again, putting it into perspective for them, having them understand it. And again, it's an excellent opportunity to notch up in expertise. If you can regurgitate what I just told you guys about expansion and contraction of electrical currents in aluminum versus copper, dude, they're gonna trust you so much. Because they may not trust you on the day. They're gonna be like, Severo, okay, sure. They're gonna go home, they're gonna be like, Google, why is aluminum wiring bad? And they're gonna find exactly that answer. And they're gonna go, oh shit, this guy really knew what the hell he was talking about. And then when they have a conversation with you the following day, they're gonna listen to everything you have to say.
Then you have to Google it.
Yeah, why not? Call them on it. Sure, I like it. No, but that's great, and it's again, you want to put yourself in their shoes. Why should they trust you, right? You're a salesperson. They don't understand if you didn't explain to them what the goal here is, and then the goal here is not to sell them a property, it's to do a really good job for them so that you earn the trust of their friends and their family. That's the goal. If you explain that from the get-go, then they should trust you implicitly from the beginning. But if you forgot to mention that, or if you weren't, explicit in explaining that to them, then you might have to, drop some knowledge on them and wait for them to Google it. That's fine. But yeah, so that's kind of that's the nuts and bolts of the electrical stuff. The other thing is, of course, grounding. Older properties sometimes not only are the plugs not grounded, but the actual board is not grounded. Does anyone know how a board is grounded?
Big as the whole rod.
No. Well, I mean, you're not wrong, but you kind of are. So I'm going to go with you're wrong. No, anybody? You got to know this stuff, guys. You got to know all this stuff. So they ground a board by attaching it. They attach the ground of the board to the water, the main entrance to the water. Because where's that going? Right into the ground, right? Because that's where the water's coming in from the city. It's in underground, right? So if there were to be an electric short or a lightning strike or whatever, it's going to go right down to the ground. Everybody's safe.
Doesn't your ground it has to be 6 feet deep or something like that though, so that your wire is 6 feet deep? Your water lines?
I don't know the exact depth.
I thought the ground, that's why I said a long rod, because I've seen it.
It must be 6 feet deep because everybody attaches it to the water entrance, the main water entrance.
Okay.
Yeah. So it can be a very, very long copper wire to ground it.
And what is it that they're grounding?
The entire electrical entrance. Okay. So imagine a lightning strike comes and it goes straight into your board. it's only got one place to go, in which case it would go straight down into the ground, which is awesome. So there are some other ways of like grounding the board, which is like it's not actually how to ground the board. Yeah.
Surge protector? Surge protector for the box?
Yeah, no, oh my god, I got pitched that, but I didn't take it. I don't know the details of it, but yeah, they produce it. Yeah, they sell that as well. It's not a replacement for a ground,
No, but no.
but it's
So if you have a lady,
buy it.
no. The guy wanted a lot of money to change my board, and I was like, that's too expensive, man. I like my Russian hookup to my electrical board.
To change the board, we have to get the city to turn on the main.
You do, yep. But master electricians have a direct line to hydro to make that call. So they'll call them and say, hey, this is the address, shut the power off, and they shut the power off. Yeah, so when I upgraded to 200, that exact same thing happened. Yeah. So I think the average cost to upgrade from 100 to 200 is about $2,500 right now. Could be less, you know. It's not bad. You can find a way more expensive, dude. Like way more. There's some master electricians that cost like $4,200 for like a full like Siemens board or whatever. They're loosening up in terms of having stock, not only for the board, but for the breakers and stuff too. The stock is starting to loosen up a little bit, which is great. Yeah. So what else? What else are building questions?
Water heater.
Water heater. You talking about the water tank?
What the water tank, I always mention that they,
Yeah.
there's nothing to replace.
Yeah. So why did they mention the date of the water tank, guys?
Insurance.
Yeah, that's the only reason. Like what water tanks can, if they're properly taken care of and they're not just sitting on the concrete, you know, they can last, 15, 16 years pretty easily. But why do we have to change it every 10 years? It's strictly for insurance. It's the same thing with oil tanks. I think oil tanks is what, 20 years or something? 15? I don't remember. But there's a specific amount of time for the oil tanks as well. I don't remember. I sold the property with an oil tank.
Just tell my clients to go like, you will send you soon.
Yeah, so you rent it. Yeah, just rent it. Easy.
Dude, they came at like 6 in the morning to replace my tank when I was flooded.
Yeah.
And after that, I was yeah, 24 hour service. After that, I was like, okay, dude. I have to recommend this to everyone.
On their own, or is it called?
No, I have to call them.
Is there more companies that?
No.
Yeah.
That rent? Not that I know
No, I
of.
don't think so.
Not that I know of.
Why are most of them, I don't know if you guys find the same thing, but so many of these hot water tanks are right on the floor. They don't come in a bassin.
Yes, you have to buy the bassin separately.
Why wouldn't they just include it?
It's so stupid. It's so stupid.
That is
He
stupid.
also so includes it.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But yeah, when you buy the hot water tank, it doesn't come with. So you have to buy that thing separately. And inspectors are going to want to see that.
Yeah.
Because when concrete inherently can get moist, right? It's porous. It's a porous material. This is why it's like when water sits up against the house, it's not designed to stop the water. Concrete is not designed for that. The water is coming in, whether it comes in the form of efflorescence or if it comes in very slowly or just in moistness on the walls or whatever, doesn't matter. It's coming in. If your water table's high, water's coming in. So when it comes to the hot water tank, if it's sitting on the concrete, which we know can get moist sometimes, and it's metal on moist, what the hell do you think's happening? Absolutely. And that's why we have explosions of water tanks here and there, because they just start sitting on the concrete, not being attended to, and maybe they're 15 years old, and game over.
I'm amazed. Should we be telling our clients then, make sure to go buy a bassin and have a thing for it?
If I have the opportunity, of course, I'll tell them that, But oftentimes, if I'm meeting a seller and I see there's no bassin there, I'll be like, ugh, inspector's gonna be angry about this. It's really hard to put one in if it's already there, because it's full and it's attached, right? Like, hopefully they put it with something flexible there, but no chance.
There's no governing body for Hydro Solutions, like they're forced to do this. It only makes sense. I'm so frustrated.
Well, Hydro Solutions does it, right? That's what Savera was saying. Hydro Solutions will include the bassin.
Oh, they all. I'm sorry. They are.
Yeah, it's like just normal.
I was very impressed. Very impressed.
Yeah, no, it's just a normal thing that when we install it ourselves that we have to remember to do that. Yeah.
And plus, every 10 years, they just come and replace it. You don't have to hire somebody to replace it. Go buy a new one from Rona.
Yeah.
Or replace it yourself.
Yeah.
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 It's like $23 every 2 months or something.
I'm just amazed. I don't know if you guys are doing your building inspections. Like, I feel like 80%, and you never see one on, just
Yeah.
No.
Honestly, the property, that's never nice houses.
Yeah, nice houses, newer houses.
Just a truly duplex, and there's a rusted out,
Yup.
paint all in the back.
It would have been funny to see what the hot water tank looked like on the property you saw yesterday.
Oh, dude, I was in the crawl space. I didn't want to go down there.
What is it?
100,000.
100,000. Have you ever called?
85K max, bro, max.
I don't even think.
Max.
I don't even
I'll do it for 85. Anyway, that's a separate
Yeah, we'll
discussion.
figure
Sorry,
it out.
guys.
We'll figure it out.
Cool. So, what else have we seen in our building inspections? What else have you guys seen that people are taking note of or not taking note of, et cetera, et cetera?
Struck us in the market that we were in. I think I did like 3 building inspections.
I know there's a lot of waiting.
Yeah.
A lot of waiting in the inspection. So I think it's great to kind of have this refresher course because as we go into a more balanced market, there's going to be more inspections, and inspections are going to be more of a hurdle for us. For the last year, they've kind of just been a formality. It's been kind of what we always wanted them to be, which is you give me a list of crap I need to take care of over the next 3-4 years. You know, whereas now it's going to be, you know, give me a list of stuff that I'm going to probably end up asking me for a price reduction for. Which I'm hoping it doesn't fully transition to that, I hate that, but it would not surprise me, put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Now you actually, I'm proud that it's always got my family.
Absolutely. Yep.
Offices, almost like it's end of life.
Yep. I mean, that's really easy to do visually, right? You see a deck and it looks like this right here. You got a problem. You know, that thing's falling apart. There's a lot you can recommend a seller do when you meet with them. They have amazing products at Home Depot to make a 20-year-old deck look like a brand new deck. Really, really good stuff. Like, if I wanted to just ruin this entire look, I can fix it with that deck product. It's amazing. So yeah, they've got a product to fill cracks. So you go around and fill all the cracks. And it's almost like a caulking.
For wood.
Yeah, specifically for outdoors and specifically for wood. So that's the first thing you do is you fill all the cracks. Then you get this product called Deck Over. And the way I describe it, when I describe it to my sellers, is I say, it's almost like you took a can of paint and a bag of sand, and you poured the sand inside the can of paint and stirred the shit out of it. So it's really thick. It's like really thick, and it's granule. So it's also designed to fill in small cracks. Like it wouldn't do this, obviously, that's what you have the kind of caulking thing for, but it would fill all these little holes. And all you do is pour it on, roll it on, and that's it. And I swear the thing is actual magic. As long as your actual things that are holding up the deck are solid, which those really do last forever, even when people replace a deck, 9 times out of 10, they don't replace the actual foundation of the deck, which is the jack posts, which is the elephant feet or all of that stuff, depending on how it's built, all that fun stuff.
Wouldn't it just be better to like replace the broken wood one by one with like better engineered wood that they have these days?
So yes and no. If you did that, it would be mix and match type thing,
Yeah.
so it could look funny.
Okay.
That's number one. And number 2 is the price of wood, depending on how many things you have to replace, could be really expensive. You know, whereas you could probably get away with maybe 3 gallons of the deck over product, which is like $100.
Okay.
You know, I think it's like $35 a gallon. I think at least it was the last time I bought it, but probably double. Inflation. Cool, guys. All right, so that's pretty much all I got. Any other questions before we adjourn? We're not actually adjourning, by the way. We're just adjourning from the online audience. Any other questions before we adjourn? Cool. Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, everybody that's tuned in.